Welcome everyone. Think I know everybody that's here, but if not, I am Elena Beekler, and I am a professor at Loras College where I teach in kinesiology, and my background is in exercise physiology with an emphasis in sport performance. So I'm here to share some tips for you on race day nutrition. So when we think about, what type of tool is this, or why is this important that we kind of discuss? It turns out that for prolonged exercise, so anything greater than 90 minutes in duration, if we are using carbohydrates as a tool, that can enhance our performance between 15 to 35%. So this can make a substantial difference in our performance, and it's eating. Eating is easy to do. The hard thing is like doing the workouts. So you're already doing the hard things. Let's do the easy thing, which is eating snacks in order to enhance our performance. So what are we talking about when we say enhances your performance? We see that it will help us to prevent a drop in blood glucose or your blood sugar levels. It also, we've seen in our research that it'll decrease the perception of work. So let's say that I'm running at a particular speed, for example, it'll feel easier if I'm fueling myself appropriately in comparison to if I'm carb depleted, essentially. It also leads to an increased time to fatigue. So it will allow us to, do more before we run out of fuel. Okay. So again, who needs to use carbs as a fuel source during exercise? Again, anything greater than 90 minutes. Some research has supported activity that's greater than 60, between that 60-minute and 90-minute window. So it may or may not help for those short distances, but if you're doing any race that's over 90 minutes, yes, you absolutely should be taking in carbs. Okay. So there's not like a magic potion. Okay. So athletes should try to experiment with the type of carbs, the timing of the consumption, and the amount of carbs that they can tolerate. Okay. So different athletes will be able to handle different amounts of carbs. Different athletes will prefer different fuel choices. Some things will upset one person's stomach, but are great for others. So it's important that we're using these tactics in some of our longer training bouts so that we can figure out what is exactly the right thing for you individually. So let's start with a little discussion. So the night before, do I need to carb load? What do you think? Carb loading help? Does that matter?
Not the night before.
Okay.
2 nights before.
2 nights before?
That's
okay, so
what
we've heard that 2 nights before it does help. Is there a certain distance that I have to travel in order for carb loading to be helpful? If I'm like going to do a 5K tomorrow, should I carb load?
No.
Over 90 minutes?
Yeah, so it seems like that 90-minute mark is really the ticket for the need to carb load. If you're doing something less than that, then just eating, you want to eat enough calories, but you don't necessarily need to kind of overdo it. As Bill said, a lot of people like to do it 2 nights before. Research has shown 2 nights before or the night before can be helpful, again, if it's greater than 90 minutes in duration, that event, that race or whatever. Okay. What should you eat? Again, it should be a nice mix of healthy carbs. However, we want to try to avoid any types of high fiber items that might not sit well with you. So again, think about those things. And I always tell people that, once you figure out what that meal is the night before that works for you, stick with that and don't modify it, try to keep consistent with that. Hydration is another thing that I'll try to hit on today, but hydration should actually start 1 to 2 days prior to competition. And so, for a lot of people that are training every single day, hydration is important all the time because you're always preparing for another workout. And so, if it's really this 24-hour cycle, it's important that we're kind of on top of that all the time. So, okay, race day. Welcome to race day. All right. So what should we be doing on race day? Ideally, our recommendations are to consume breakfast 3 to 4 hours prior to the race, right? So now imagine that you are at Ironman, whatever, and your race starts at 7 a.m. Should you get up at 2 then to eat breakfast? I would say no, you should not do that. Sleep is more valuable than meeting this time guideline. So if possible, eating breakfast 3 to 4 hours prior to the race will help us to avoid GI distress. But if that's not realistic, then follow the next guideline, which is 1 hour prior to the race. Okay. Again, if you're somewhere in between that range, it's 2 hours before the race, it's 5 a.m. and you have a 7 a.m. start, then you can kind of mix and match those guidelines to kind of meet your needs based on when the race logistically is starting. So, ideally, like we said, 3 to 4 hours prior to, if possible, you should consume 4 to 5 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram body weight. So I just kind of did this based on a 150-pound person. So if you're 150 pounds, that ends up being between, 1,100 to 1,700. Yeah, Heidi.
What is CHO?
Sorry, that means carb. Sorry.
All right.
That's the biochemical abbreviation for carb. Sorry. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen.
What's PRO?
Protein.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I forget that you guys are not science majors sometimes.
I followed you, Elena.
Who said that?
Jill.
Well, Jill, I think you maybe have an upper hand in the science department.
Yeah.
So for carbs, essentially you're looking at, a little over 1,100 calories of carbs. That seems like a lot though.
Yeah.
That's a guideline that I've never personally been able to meet. There's not that many people that I think can really comfortably do that, the meal before their race. So I think that guideline is a little far-fetched for a lot of people to reach. But the next one I think is more realistic. So if we look at 1 hour prior to the race, 1 to 2 grams of carbs per kilogram body weight, again, for that 150-pound person, 300, 500, somewhere in that range in terms of carbs. And then I also provided a little bit with proteins as well. Protein, not a whole lot. Again, if you're doing an Ironman or something like that, you might want a little more protein just because that's your only meal for the day until, whenever you finish. So, helping yourself to kind of feel more satisfied up front might be helpful. If you're doing a shorter race, maybe it's 2 hours, 4 hours, even a half Ironman, for example, you probably don't need that much protein just because you're going to eat lunch once you're done. Okay. So protein doesn't need to be huge, especially the shorter the race is. Fluids, again, I think those guidelines are easy to meet. So 13 to 20 ounces right away. And then, 10 to 14 ounces that hour prior to the race. Again, that can be really any product that you want, water, Gatorade, whatever beverage you prefer. I'll talk a little bit about caffeine here coming up as well. Any questions on this stuff? What breakfast looks like in terms of numbers? I have some example meals on the next page as well. So here are some winning breakfast combos. I like to say, a fruit, a grain, a protein. Again, we can kind of minimize the protein, so it doesn't have to be huge. So, for example, for number 2, you see blueberries, toast, eggs, maybe only just 1 egg, especially if you're somebody who, you feel like you don't like to eat a lot before a race, then, just a little bit of protein should be fine. One other thing that I think is surprising to triathletes or athletes in general that are maybe pretty health conscious in general is notice that I put whole wheat toast or white toast. And the reason for that is, sometimes those items that are whole grain or have high fiber content, sometimes those don't sit as well. So sometimes the simpler sugars are going to be better, in that morning of the day, day of the race in comparison to something that you would eat on a normal day, which might be the whole wheat tortilla or the whole wheat toast, something like that. So sometimes simpler sugars are okay, just, in that meal right before your competition. Okay. Any other, what are people's common breakfasts? What do you guys like?
Oatmeal.
Oatmeal's a big
Dude,
one.
Sauce all the way. Go applesauce.
Applesauce. Okay.
I have a banana.
Okay.
That's it.
I like peanut butter a lot
Yeah,
Okay.
peanut
On
butter
any-
toast.
on anything.
Others.
I always do toast with peanut butter and jelly.
Okay.
I
I
always do
gave my
toast with
twin
peanut butter and jelly. I do
And
toast
race-
with peanut butter and honey.
On race
Honey's
morning, I
good.
usually do a bagel with peanut butter and jelly, banana, and believe it or not, a bottle of Ensure.
Okay.
What's that?
Because Kurt's old.
Because
What is that? Is that like kaopectate or something? What is that?
No, it's not, Bill.
It's kind of like Gatorade for babies. It's baby Gatorade.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no. I have a question. I feel like for people who do like early morning workouts, so like they get up and run right away. I mean, I rarely eat breakfast before then. So let's say like you get up and you're gonna do your long run, and then I usually just fuel during the run. I don't eat breakfast. I just start that fuel like 40 minutes in.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's okay? Or would
Yeah,
you
the only thing,
recommend that?
yeah, and I think a lot of people do that, and there is some value. There's certainly some value to that. You got to get it done. You got kids running around. You got to get done and get back home. I get that. But if you could add, 5 to 10 minutes before you start, or even just as you're walking out the door, add a goo or something like that, and that'll kind of help to get your sugar metabolism going a little bit. And
that's just for over 90 minutes.
yeah, I would say so.
So you like
but
your regular like Tuesday run, don't worry about it.
if it's high intensity, you might want to. It just depends. If you don't feel hungry, then you're probably okay. You're probably used to that. But if it's going to be high intensity, it sure wouldn't hurt to have a little granola bar or a goo or something like that as you head out the door, just to kind of get things going a little bit that way. So yeah. Other questions on breakfast?
I just have a comment on Maggie's thing. Maggie, sometimes what I like to do is just have a couple of bites of like a granola bar or like some kind of a bar if I'm doing a long run, like for marathon training, just because I feel like it takes away some of that sloshy feeling from just drinking a lot of water and Gatorade. So I will sometimes have like a half of a Nutri-Grain bar or something, not a whole one, but maybe like 50 calories just to kind of absorb some of the liquid. And I found that to be helpful.
I don't even want to admit what I do.
You don't do anything.
I have a banana and a Red Bull, and then I start running, and then I carry applesauce with me, and I eat applesauce for 33 miles. It's great. It's all good.
See, those are all sugars. That's okay. They're all carbs. It's fine. All right. Go ahead.
I think it just depends on what works for you is really what you got to figure out. And
Yeah.
that's all part of training as well. So for me, the majority of my workouts are all fasted. I mean, I don't typically fuel for anything during the week. On the weekends, when I get into longer runs, like hour and 20 minutes, hour 30, 2 hours, I might have something before, but definitely fuel during. And then when I get into longer rides on the weekends, that's when I start playing with what I might eat for breakfast beforehand. So on those weekends where I have, 2, 3, 4 hour rides, I might, do the banana and the bagel and the Ensure and just figure out how that all works and sits with my stomach, just so I know. So I don't think you ever want to go into a race where you haven't ever eaten breakfast before a workout at all, and then try and eat something before a half Ironman or Ironman, because you want to have that practice leading up to it.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we had our breakfast. We're at the race site. Again, continue to drink water, coffee, Gatorade, whatever you want leading up to the race. And then 5 to 10 minutes prior to the race, you can have just another little snippet of carbs. So 50 to 60 grams, which ends up being about 200 to 250 calories, or whatever is tolerable. A lot of people can only handle 100. Maybe it's a banana, maybe it's a goo, maybe it's some Gatorade, something like that. But the timing here is pretty important, because essentially what we want to do is we want to get those sugars into our bloodstream, but we don't want to start storing them. So if the race starts at 7 or your wave starts at 7:25 or whatever it is, you want to have that at the very last minute, because those sugars are going to be fresh in your bloodstream. We don't want to start storing those. So that's the deal with the timing for this kind of last blast of sugar. Again, whatever you can handle at that point. So like I said, I usually have a goo and, a couple a couple sips of water, and then that's good for me to, tolerate. But, whatever you can handle. And again, like Kurt said, it's all about practicing this stuff in your training so that you know what you feel comfortable with on that race day. Okay. So now gun goes off, we're in the race. What do we want to do? Ideally, the research shows we should have between 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour, which ends up being between 120 to 240 calories. Okay. How does this translate in triathlon? Because again, these are just standard recommendations for endurance athletes. Well, we split it up based on bike and run. And realistically, well, you're not going to have anything during the swim, I would say. So once you get to the bike,
unless you're drinking the entire lake.
Yes, you could get a little bit of hydration in the water, but hopefully not too much. So when you get onto the bike, now's your chance to A, catch up from the swim, but also B, try to bank a little bit before the run. Okay, so people can generally tolerate more on the bike in comparison to on the run. And as I would tell Olivia, it is worth slowing down so that you can get calories in. It is always worth that if the race is greater than 90 minutes. This will make more of a difference in the long run than, oh, I feel good and I'm not hungry and I'm just going to push through, because that will a lot of times catch up with you. So again, if it's greater than 90 minutes for this race, it's worth slowing down so that you can kind of hit some of these guidelines. So in terms of hydration on the bike, you can easily kind of quantify this because how many bottles you've had. So 16 to 24 ounces of fluid per hour. Again, that's a pretty general recommendation. You could need more. Probably not a whole lot less, but you could need more depending on the environmental conditions and, some other individual factors. But, if it's hot and humid, you might need a lot more than that. But those are just kind of some standard recommendations. The hydration recommendations are not as set in stone as the carb recommendations, just because there's so much variance with just weather in general. The wind, the humidity, the heat, all those factors are going to be important to determining how much fluid you need. So again, that kind of gives you a starting point. Again, on the bike, between 150 to 250 calories an hour. And again, we want to shoot for the top end of that, just because people tend to tolerate it better on the bike. It's a little bit trickier on the run in terms of eating while you're out of breath. But also that's usually when people start experiencing GI distress is when they get to the run. So when you get to the run, again, do what you can. 100 to 200 calories an hour is a great goal. And then hydration as you can, as the aid stations come up, take a drink at every aid station, depending on how often they are and what the weather is and those types of things. So those are, again, pretty general, but I would say those carb recommendations, I hold true to almost every person. Here's some examples of products to use in races. Again, do you like to use liquids? Do you like to use solids? Do you like to use some combination of these? The other thing that I would do would be to look into what is going to be offered on the race course. So for example, for Ironman races, they usually have Gatorade, water. On the run course, they'll have Red Bull, Pepsi, Gatorade, water. So train with those. And if that works, great. Now you don't have to carry anything. You can get everything off the course. Figure out what brands and what flavors of gels they're going to have as well. Practice with those. If those sit well, great. Now you don't have to carry those because they're going to be on the course and you're used to working with those. There's so many different products. I was looking at some of this information today when I was working on finishing up this presentation, but I kind of listed them in order of my preference on the liquid side, but this isn't even an all-inclusive list. A couple things to look for when you're thinking about different liquids. Like I said, number one, in my opinion, is what are they serving on the course? Number two is the calorie content. So like Tailwind and Heed, you can get 200 calories in one bottle. So if you're somebody that doesn't want a lot of solids, well, that might be a better option because it's higher in calories in comparison to like Gatorade or Powerade. So, looking at some of those factors, some have caffeine and some don't. So that's another thing to look at as well. I know some of the Noon tabs have caffeine in them, and I believe some Tailwind products have caffeine as well. So if that's something that you want, looking into those products is also a good thing to try. On the solids side, again, this isn't even close to all inclusive, just some common examples, different goos or gels, shot blocks, granola bar, Cliff Bar. The Cliff Bars are nice for some of those longer distance races because it does have a little bit of protein in it as well. Honey Stinger waffles are basically just carbs. The Huma, I'm not sure if it said how you say it, Huma or Huma gels. I don't know if anybody's tried those, but they have like chia in them. So they're supposed to be like a little more natural and slow release sugars. So somebody had told me that they really like those. The Leaser Special, the salted nut rolls on your bike, pretzels, oranges, and bananas are also served on Ironman courses and a lot of other race courses as well. So those are good things to try on the run. Other tips about in-race nutrition, our research shows that by alternating carb sources, you actually improve your absorption rate. So for example, if you could switch between Gatorade, shot blocks, and Cliff Bar, for example, if you can kind of rotate through those three sources, that's better than just having all tailwind. So if you can have at least 2 to 3 different sources, that seems to improve the absorption rate and decrease your chances of getting GI distress, which is, like we said, super common in the run. I think it's something along the lines of between 70 to 80% of people in Ironman races experience GI distress, among other things, but that's one of the side effects of doing those super long races, turns out. Other comments on this page on example products, other things that work really well for people that I don't have listed.
I loved my pickle juice during the Ironman. So I didn't really care to just like take a salt tablet upsets my stomach, but the pickle juice didn't. And I'm a heavy sweater, so I need that salt. And it was kind of refreshing too. And Bill's salted nut roll saved my life.
Thank you. The other one is, I can't think of the name right now. It's the round peanut butter and jelly.
Uncrustables.
Crustables, yes. I love those on the bike. Are awesome.
Agreed.
Other things people like?
I actually, when I did my 50K, I actually froze applesauce with like apple, bananas, apple, different fruits. I froze them and when I ran, I just had them in my back. One, because I'm old, they helped my back not ache because they were frozen. And I could eat them like very slowly. It was very refreshing, but full of yumness. And the different flavors were awesome. But the frozen in your back totally helps.
That's funny.
Anybody
Elena,
else?
baby food actually, like that comes in those pouches. They mix, grains with fruit, even kind of pre-race too, but they're very nicely packaged as well and pureed and pretty good for GI as well.
Yeah, they have those with oatmeal in them, don't they? Like an oatmeal with banana or oatmeal with apples and stuff like that. Those kinds. Yeah.
I like the one with sweet potatoes.
I have
one that
lots
has
at my
sweet
house.
potatoes
If
in it.
anybody needs a sample, you can just come on over anytime. We have a whole cupboard full. So
I have an entire case of go-go squeeze. So ready to go.
Anybody else, anything that works really well?
I like fig Newtons, like the strawberry.
Oh,
bitter.
fig Newtons. I forgot about those.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I switched to the Humagels about 2 years ago, and one, because they're all natural, but two, they just seem to go down way better than any of the other processed gels. They're just smoother and just easier they just sit better on the stomach, I think. So if you haven't tried them, I would at least give them a try. You might find that works better than the manufactured gels.
I know it was one of the things I told Elena is I'm too tired to chew. So anything I can squeeze down my throat is good. The least amount of chewing, the better.
Scratch is a brand that makes some nutrition, and they make a super nutrition. It's got like 400 calories and 8 ounces. It's kind of nice if you don't like to eat a lot of food.
Excellent.
Scratch I did not put on here. That's a bigger one.
I like their
also use
super
Scratch
fuel.
for the hydration for the liquids, and it sits better with my stomach than Gatorade.
Yeah, I like it better too.
I like now the more isotonic gels that are more watery. So I know the Goo now, the Roctane. I know at least last time I did an Ironman, they were serving the Roctane one, which is it's more watery, and that definitely I like that. Sits better. When I train, I use Cliff because I get it for cheap, and I go through like a case of them a week when I'm training a lot. So I'm a cheap ass, so I'll go for the cheaper stuff. But when I race, it's all about the Roctane or any of the other isotonic gels that are watery, so they tend to sit better and go down quicker. Apparently they absorb faster, but who knows?
Anything else? Anybody? Okay. Caffeine is another big one to talk about. What's the deal with caffeine? Caffeine can enhance our performance. I listed a couple of the ways in which we see it affecting athletic performance. Certainly important in events, or can be helpful, I shouldn't say important, can be helpful in events that are greater than 60 minutes in duration. Studies have used a wide range of dosage, so anywhere from 3 to 15 milligrams per kilogram body weight. So again, I use that 150-pound person to kind of calculate what does that look like. Well, that's between 150 to basically 1,000 milligrams of caffeine. Again, as a reference point, 1 cup of coffee is around 80 to 100 milligrams. So you're looking at, 1.5 cups of coffee up to 10 cups of coffee. So there's not necessarily a standardized dosage that we have said definitively, like, yes, this is how much you need. There's a lot of individual variation. When we think about, what's your normal tolerance, some people drink a ton of coffee every day or a ton of caffeine every day. So, maybe they need more during a race in order to see an enhancement of performance because they kind of have a higher threshold. If you're somebody who doesn't consume a whole lot of caffeine, then maybe you don't need as much when you get to a race situation. We do see that it can improve performance between 8 to 28%. So again, it's easy to drink caffeine. It's hard to do the work to get yourself fit enough to compete in a race. So I'm a big believer in do those little things in order to kind of, bump up your performance. Research has shown that it is more effective in highly trained people. I would say that anybody that's training for kind of a long distance triathlon probably fits within that standard in comparison to, like an untrained person would just be just your average person that would be completing these different experiments. So again, there's all sorts of products that we kind of looked at on the previous slide that include caffeine. Lots of those gels contain caffeine. There's some shot blocks that have them. Some of the beverages do as well. So again, look at those factors. And again, if I'm going to alternate between different types of gels or something like that, maybe I want to have caffeine at mile 5 on the bike and caffeine at mile 50 of the bike or whatever. So you can kind of space it out so that you kind of have a constant high, I guess. Is that the right word to say? When we think about caffeine. So when should you take it? You can start by consuming caffeine 30 to 60 minutes prior to your event. Maybe that's coffee. Maybe that's something else, a different beverage, a Red Bull, whatever works for you. So again, you can use those before and during the events. There's this other thing called caffeine tapering, which I would never be able to do. But that's like kind of a newer thing that they have been showing to be pretty effective. And so basically like 2 weeks before your major race, you like decrease the amount of caffeine that you consume normally. And so like, it's kind of like the taper from your workouts. And so then on race day, you have, like a lower tolerance. So the caffeine will be more effective on race day because you haven't consumed very much of it in the weeks leading up. I can't do that, but if you can, maybe that's something to think about or try as well. Let's see, questions on caffeine or comments, concerns? Anything there?
Elena, I just have a comment on how I've always thought about caffeine, and that caffeine tapering makes sense to me is, we think of like the adrenal glands and kind of the center of energy, adrenaline. And you know, I think of when I'm eating and fueling, I'm kind of feeding the adrenal glands, but every time you use caffeine, it kind of squeezes the adrenal glands to produce that energy. And so the more demand you have on it, the less reserve you have. So that makes sense with the caffeine tapering, that you kind of build the reserves, and then it'll be there for you when you're making demand on it with the caffeine during the race.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the idea of it. Again, I don't think I can do that, but I like the idea, which probably means that I have an addiction to caffeine, but that's okay. I'll accept that in this point in my life.
I do caffeine tapering because for me it's easy because I don't drink coffee. So just in my normal day, I don't do caffeine. So I try to save it for, I use the caffeine gel very rarely. For example, I had one like last week and I feel the hit I get because I was on like a 5-hour bike ride. I took it at like 4.5 hours. And I felt that 4.5 hours, right as it hits my tongue, I feel those caffeine in it. I know. And it's really interesting. And that was like the only caffeine I had all week. So yeah, sample size of 1, but I think, you know, it makes me think I feel better. So I'll take it.
Yeah. And placebo effect is a thing too. So, I mean, if we just say it's going to work, it's going to work. So
There are people out there that can survive without caffeine for an entire day.
I guess
Who are you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can. I like coffee.
Can any of us imagine Eric all hopped up on caffeine?
You guys, they just give me some Mountain Dew sometime, and man, you never hit you.
Elena, I also never eat caffeine. I've never had caffeine in like 25 years.
No way.
Really?
It gives me migraines, so I can't have it.
Put it on right now.
I probably had a full pot of coffee today.
Yeah.
I'll have to fix
Yeah.
it in a minute. Any other comments or questions on in-race stuff? The other thing I wanted to mention was, if, you know, Kurt already mentioned this, but it's not enough to just have a plan and show up on race day and be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. You have to practice with it too, which makes sense, right? So again, on those long bike rides, those long runs, practice what you think would work, and then, you know, use that to kind of fine tune whatever your race day plan will be. So that way you have a good idea, hopefully, of how you'll respond on the race day. And I wanted to talk a little bit about recovery, whether that's from, Breck, you'll have to have Dad. I don't know how to do it. Whether that is from a hard workout or after a race. So, you know, post-race, post-hard workout, you have this thing, the metabolic window, which I love, and it's 30 to 45 minutes after the exercise is over, and you have this chance to put your muscle in anabolic state. Anabolic state means your muscle is building. You're thinking like, I don't care about building muscles, Elena. I'm a triathlete. I don't want to have big muscles. That's okay, because when we say anabolic state, we also mean that your muscles would be recovering from whatever that strenuous workout was that you did, or that strenuous race that you did. So anabolic doesn't necessarily mean like the muscle is getting larger. Okay. So if you don't take any calories in during that time, it negatively impacts your ability to recover in the way of glycogen resynthesis, which basically means like your ability to fill your sugar storage within your body. So you want to get some calories in within that 30 to 45 minute window post exercise. Again, this is important for any hard, strenuous workout, anything, you know, prolonged in nature where you really have depleted your glycogen. So again, had to be at least 90 or 60 minutes, I should say, 60 minutes high intensity, or prolonged, you know, greater than 90 minutes moderate. You should also drink 16 to 24 ounces per pound lost during the workout race. That's our guideline, which is kind of stupid in my opinion. There's not that many people that are going in to weigh themselves before and after, and then using that to figure out how much to drink. But that's the best we can do. So again, if you sweat a lot, then you need to drink a lot to replace that. That's kind of the best they came up with for that guideline. But this is me being a nerd. This shows you what that anabolic window looks like. So again, you know, 15 to 45 minutes post-exercise, you have this potential to allow yourself to recover. And that's super important if you have another hard workout. If this is your A race, this is the Ironman or whatever, who cares? Drink a beer, do whatever you want. Like, who cares about recovery? But if this is just a hard workout and you're going to have another one in a couple days, recovery is really important. So, hitting that window and allowing yourself to recover will allow you to do more in that next workout and improve at a faster rate than maybe some of your opponents. So here's some ideas for those recovery snacks. 50 to 75 grams of carbs and 20 grams of protein is the kind of the minimum recommendation. If you can kind of line this up so you do your workout and then you eat a meal. So maybe you did a long run in the morning and then you're going to have a big breakfast when you get back, you'll easily meet the guidelines. But if it's, a random time where you're not going to eat a meal right after, meeting these guidelines isn't that hard. Like, you don't have to eat a whole lot to get to 50 grams of carbs and 20 grams of protein. Something like a Cliff Bar or even like a banana with peanut butter is enough calories to kind of stimulate this recovery process. So just some examples here that include, maybe you've heard of like that carb protein 3-to-1 ratio. That's basically what this is. So, chocolate milk's a great recovery option for that. If you want something on the go, as I said, a Cliff Bar is an easy one. Banana peanut butter is easy to, throw in your work bag or whatever. If you're, busy on the road or whatever you need to do. Peanut butter sandwich, another easy one to just have ready ahead of time so you can get those in. Questions or comments on this? On things that you like for recovery?
Elena, I usually immediately following the workout, I'll have a protein shake, and then usually get cleaned up, get ready for work, and then have a breakfast in addition to that. And that seems to work real well for recovery and making sure that you get into that window you're talking about.
Anybody else? Anything? Okay, I think that's all I have. Any other things you guys want to talk about nutrition wise?
Elena, this is Jill.
Yeah.
This is a nerdy question, but we could talk about it later too if it doesn't apply to many. But taurine, it's actually an ingredient in some of those energy drinks, and I think it might be in Red Bull too. But I had talked to one of our cardiologists, and they said that there was a study how it had increased contractility of the heart, meaning kind of beating harder in athletes that kind of adversely affected them. I don't know if you by chance have come across that at all. My personal experience with that, I'm also not a huge caffeine consumption person, so I tend to be a little bit more sensitive to some of those things, but I can't remember the name of the drink. Des Moines, when they were doing the Hy-Vee triathlons, had given us samples, and I definitely felt the effects of that. And I didn't know, if there was any concern or things that you had come across with in regards to taurine, one of those amino acid additives.
I have heard of some of those in in pre-workouts. I haven't had any experience with them in energy drinks so much, but I do know that is definitely a side effect because those are like high levels in a lot of those pre-workout lifting drinks as well. And so I do know that that's one of the common side effects of those. And again, the tricky part with some of those supplements is they're really not regulated. FDA isn't really regulating them. So, if they are negatively impacting athletes, FDA isn't really necessarily doing anything about it. So, I'm not sure. Other than that, I do know that is a common side effect for like resistance training.
My other question is if you could reconfirm my Nutty Buddy habit of pre or post workout, that it's a good thing to have a little of that chocolate and that wafer with the peanut butter. That's a good thing, right?
Yeah. Those simple sugars are great. Simple sugars on race day or for hard workouts, I'm all for it. Yes.
All right, thank you.
All about figuring out if chocolate's good, man. Even if it weren't, go for it.
I know a lot of people during races eat like candy, right? Like I've
Yep.
Snicker bars.
popular, and gummy bears and Skittles.
Yep.
Yeah, all that. Man, I can't imagine though, like opening up your thing with you had a bunch of Skittles in there and it's hot. Like, oh man, that'll sticky. Yeah. I go through my like breakfast before workouts, those Nutri-Grain bars. Again, I like them and they're super cheap. How do you beat that?
Iron Man on a budget.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I do. I gotta try the Uncrustables. I'll have to try those. I actually on long rides now. I just make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. That's what I ate when I was. I think actually when I was biking by your house, Elena. I think as I was eating my peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I'm like, hey, there's Elena's house.
You'll never go back, Eric.
No.
I don't know, Bill. They're more expensive than making your own peanut butter and jelly. I don't know.
Hey, you got to splurge once in a while, Curtis.
Other thoughts, questions, comments?
Hi, little man.
Little Breck.
You say hi.
Hi, Breck.
I thought that was Richard.
That's little
funny.
Richard. Yes.
My only question is, I have some friends who are doing the Des Moines race, and I think that they would benefit from listening to this recording. Can this be emailed to anyone? Like, do you give rights for us to be able to share this?
Yeah, I'll make it into. I'm super techie now. I'll make it into a YouTube video, and then that way we can share it to anybody. That's easy enough.
Thank
That
you.
would be really helpful.
Yeah, once she's got it in the YouTube video, we'll post it to the club page, and one of the next emails we send out to the club will include it on that. So Elaine, if you just want to send me that once you have it created, I can make sure that happens.
Lots of good information.
yeah.
Thanks, Lena.
Do you
Really
have do you have any experience with some of the fasting that people are doing I mean, there's so many different ways people are doing it. I do just ones when I wake up in the morning and we'll not just do some short training, especially swims, and I won't eat anything before. But that's about all I've done. I mean, I know everybody does their own thing. People are doing like several hour long rides with only water, and I mean, I've heard it, and you know, some people do it more often. Some people do it just rarely. Some, you know, just certain times of the season. So yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so the idea with that is they're trying to enhance their fat burning capacity or their efficiency for fat burning. And so in theory, you know, you're going to increase the amount of enzymes that you have for the fat burning pathways, basically. Correct, be quiet. But the issue, I guess my biggest con with it is that by doing that, you're going to decrease your work capacity at the end of that workout. So if you would have had carbs, you could have run faster at the end, or you could have rode harder at the end. So that's kind of the trade-off. So yes, you're able to become a better fat burner, but you compromised the absolute intensity at which you were working in order to do that. So that's kind of the pros and the cons of it. So, you know, like you said, you know, doing it sometimes is great, but other times, you know, when you want to have a really quality ride or really quality run, it might be more important to give yourself the sugars so that you can maintain that pace at the end of the workout.
And Eric, I think it really depends too on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. So if you're racing a half Ironman or an Ironman, like Elena said, you're going to be able to go harder at the end with those carbs. Whereas an ultra runner that's maybe running a 100-mile race, being able to dip into those fat stores in a 100-mile foot race may be more advantageous from them. So it also depends, I think, a little bit on the type of activity that you're doing.
Yeah, it's crazy you mentioned that because I saw there was a study where someone did where it was ultra runners, and they did like 100 and what they were. It was an insane like amount. So they're kind of going the reverse on a lot of the ultra people are going to low, like you said, because you're out there so long and you don't want to have to eat as much. But anyway, someone tried, they were doing some sort of, I can't remember, it was at least a day or two, it might have been a multiple day type event. And they were doing like 120 grams of carb an hour or whatnot, and had good results. But it's just so hard in the studies they do, right? Because, you know, the sample size was like 9 or something, right? I mean, there's only so many crazy people that'll even try that. So yeah, but just really interesting. Like I heard one today, someone had a study now where it was a polarized versus more moderate training intensity, and they're doing some now on some triathletes now, because a lot of the research now is on like runners or cyclists or cross-country skiers or rowers, but we're triathletes, we're not runners, skiers, you know, everyone's got a different event. So yeah, and then they kind of, the results was they couldn't really, you know, it was so individual, they couldn't get there was no like really right or wrong. There's no strong correlation to prove one was better than the other. But yeah, there's certainly like a performer to one and a performer to the other. So yeah, interesting stuff. If you're a triathlete nerd.
Elena, thank you so much for this. This has really been helpful, and it's good to see some faces I haven't seen for a while. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks everyone for coming. Hope you got something out of it. And again, I'll share the link when I get it converted here. So.
Thank you, Elena.
Thanks,
Let me
Elena.
let me also throw out one quick thing. If you haven't already registered for your membership for the year, go ahead and do that. Tomorrow, after tomorrow, we'll be looking at all the registrants and picking those free books. So as you heard at the beginning, Bill registered, so let's lessen his chances of getting a free book, and everybody get registered.
What a way to end this.